When you shoot a tall building like this castle, you may find that the vertical walls, which should actually be going at 90 degrees parallel with the edge of the frame, they're actually tilting inwards or converging towards the top of the frame. And this is due to several factors. One factor is perspective. We're shooting at a low angle, so as we tilt the camera up to get the top of the building in the shot, our lines are converging inwards due to perspective. But also, if you're shooting on a wide angle lens as well, then lens distortion is going to cause these converging verticals to be exaggerated. So there's two problems there, but we can actually fix that in Photoshop to make our vertical lines truly vertical, so they run parallel with the edge of the frame or perpendicular to the ground. So here we have our corrected shot, and you can see there that the composition has changed when we've actually corrected our converging verticals. So as well as straightening these lines, what we're going to do is actually improve composition by extending pixels outwards, cloning them, so that the actual castle is in a similar position and we don't have to change the shape of our shot either. So the clone stamp tool is going to come in and rescue some of our composition problems, but we're going to kick off with this start image and we're going to correct these converging verticals. Now you could, in reality, climb up a hill, and if you shoot from the midpoint of this castle, the verticals won't be so converging, there won't be so much perspective distortion, or you could buy a tilt shift lens which will counteract our distortion, but you can't always find some building to climb up when you're on location, and a tilt shift lens is going to cost you money. So if we fix it in Photoshop, it'll save us time and money. So let's kick off by opening basic Photoshop before, which you'll find on your CD, and then we can make sure we've got our layers palette open. Let's just close up some of these other palettes we don't need. If you can't see the layers palette, go to Window, Layers, and that should pop up. And you can then hide things like the panel bin and the project bin by going up to Window. So you've got a nice clean and lean looking interface. The next thing to do is to make a copy of your background layer. It's always good to have a copy because you can then start from scratch very quickly if things go wrong. So let's just drag this to the Create New Layer icon, then drag the Layers palette open a wee bit so you can see the new layer. Just click down here, there you go, there's background copy, and make sure that that is selected so that we can then edit this layer. Now, as Photoshop's a very powerful package, there's several different ways to transform perspective, and I'll show you those ways now so you can then choose the way that suits your particular image's needs in the future. So let's kick off by going to Image, Transform, and Perspective, and when we choose that, make sure you've got background copy selected by the way, you then get this transformation box around the edge of the frame with little correction handles. And if we click and drag this one here to the left, you can see that it's now straightening up the vertical lines of our building. Just click the tick to apply the change, and you might find it less distracting if we turn off the background layer. So here's our transformed layer, but you can see that the castle is looking very tall and rather slim, so the composition's being dramatically changed compared to the original shot. So we could try cropping the image to try and get rid of these transparent edges that we're seeing, but it does really end up as a much smaller version of the image, and we're going to lose some of the edges of our castle as well, and it's still going to look really tall and thin, so escape to stop that. Alternatively, we could go to Image, Resize and Scale, and again you get a selection handle. You could try increasing the size of the castle to fill the edge of the frame, lose these transparent edges, but by scaling the castle up, you're going to end up creating fuzzy looking pixels because you're enlarging the image, and that's not really a good way to improve composition. So for subtle perspective changes, this technique might work, but in this particular case, the perspective distortion is too dramatic and it's not going to do a good job using transform. So I'm just going to hit Escape to undo the transformation scale option there. I'm going to Control Z to step back until I've got my original copy, and we're going to edit this using a lens correction filter to improve our problems more effectively. So, Image Transform Perspective created a very tall and thin looking castle. Let's try an alternative technique by going to Filter, Correct Camera Distortion. If you're using Photoshop CS, then you'll find a similar filter in Filter, Distort, Correct Lens Distortion, but that's in CS. In Elements, it's got its own little pride of place spot just here at the top of the menu. So click, and you will then see the lens correction interface, which I shall just scale down to fit into my window, like so. And then we can choose the option to fit in view here. There we go. There is our image in the Correct Camera Distortion filter, or if you're using CS, it's called Lens Correction. So we've got a handy grid here that helps us work out whether our image's lines are actually vertical or whether they're tilting. If you can't see the grid, then click down here to turn it on. So there we go, there's our alignment grid, and you can always change the colour if it clashes with some of the colours in the shot to make it easier to see the grid lines. But a nice neutral grey tends to stand out over anything else. Though we do have a rather grey castle, so there might be an argument there that we could change these to a lighter, whiter colour. But I think we can see them quite clearly, so I'm going to leave them at grey, and what we'll do is use the distortion tools here and change the actual lines so they're actually running parallel with the edge of the frame. As you can see, there's quite a few controls in the correct camera distortion filter, but the only one we're really interested in is the perspective control area, and here you can actually drag to the left to straighten up those tilting vertical lines. Keep on dragging until they run parallel with the alignment grid. I'm sort of trying to look at this section just about here and this section here as well, so we need to tweak that a wee bit to try and get a nice compromise with our vertical lines on each corner. So something like -87 should do the trick. Maybe take that down to about 85, just type in a new value, and there we have it. Now, as you can see, we've still got these transparent edges that we have to deal with, but the castle's looking a lot better. It's not so tall and thin, so the distortion isn't as dramatic as it was using the perspective transform command. So this is much better at actually sorting out our converging verticals while preserving composition. But we do still have these transparent edges, and there is an option to scale up the shot to try and lose them. But by doing that, you're also losing crucial areas like the top of the frame, and as you can see, the shot is looking a little bit fuzzy. If I just turn off the grid now, you've got blown up pixels. Photoshop's having to make up extra information, and by enlarging any photograph, it's always going to look worse. So let's take this back down to the center point again at 100%, and we'll fix the composition using the standard Photoshop editor. So we've done all we can in the correct camera distortion window. We can click OK now and fix our composition problems in the main interface. Let's just turn off that background layer so we can see the layer and all its transparent edges, and we know which parts we need to fix. So we've used the correct camera distortion filter to straighten up our converging verticals, and unfortunately then we've also added transparent edges to the frame. So to keep the shape of the picture as it was originally, what I'm going to do is grab the move tool and just drag the castle down a little bit so it's actually got some nice space at the top and bottom of the castle, more symmetrical now, and you can see it's in a way similar to the position of the castle in the original layer. But by moving the castle down to create a better composition, I've also added transparent edges to the top of the frame. So there's a lot of transparent edges I need to remove, and we can do that with the clone stamp tool. Before we start cloning, what I'm going to do is create a new layer by clicking here, and that creates a layer called layer 1, and we're going to actually clone onto that layer. So if we make any mistakes or need to make any changes to the clone pixels, we can do so easily without affecting our corrected layer, like so. So target this layer, and then grab the clone stamp tool by pressing S or clicking here and choosing it that way, and we're ready to start cloning out unwanted pixels. We can change the brush size to something larger, like maybe 200 by clicking here. We can make sure we've got aligned ticked and sample all layers, so it'll actually sample the layers below our transparent layer at the top here. So to clone, what I'm going to do is just move this out of the way a little bit by dragging it down. I'm then going to press Alt and click to sample some of these clouds here, and then move up and start spraying the clouds into the corner, and hopefully that extends the clouds in a natural way to the top transparent section of our shot. And then once you get to around about here, stop spraying when you see a hint of the castle's chimney appear, like so. Now I'm going to press Ctrl and plus to zoom in a little bit onto my shot, just so we can get a better idea of our cloning. And you can see we've got some repeating patterns here, which gives away the fact that the area is being cloned. So what I'll do now is just alt click in a different part and click and spray, just to kind of disguise some of those repeating patterns. And then again, maybe this bit here could look a bit similar to the area below, because you can see where we've sampled from. So just click and spray and just tidy things up a little bit and create a bit of variety in the cloned areas. To get rid of this, we're going to have to click somewhere like here and then click and spray and extend to the right there. So we're now clicking little and often. You can hit Tab to get rid of the floating windows, spacebar gets you the hand tool, and then again just alt click from a different area, maybe around about here, and then click and spray and add the clone pixels to the top. And slowly but surely, in little step-by-step increments, you're just going to alt-click and continue cloning out the top transparent section. There we go. You can then alt-click again and just tidy up areas you think need to be fine-tuned. Use the zoom tool and the hand tool to get a better view of this section here, and then grab the polygonal lasso tool, because what we're going to do is create a selection to protect this turret from being cloned over by the clouds. So let's do that now. I'm just going to hit tab to get rid of the floating windows, and I'm going to click to make a selection around this vertical edge here. Don't worry about that background bit of castle, we can lose that. That's not so important. What I'm going to do is just make a rough selection here around the edge of the castle, like so. Place the last point on the first. It's just this area here that I'm trying to protect, and then what we can do is go to select inverse to then make the rest of the shot editable but protect the castle from being clouded over. So tab to get the floating windows back up, and then S to go back to the clone stamp, and let's see how this is working. Use a smaller size brush of 70 maybe, and then just alt click to grab a bit of cloud like so and extend that over the edge of the frame as much as you can. Alt click again and keep growing bits of cloud until we are covering that transparent edge. Now the cool thing is when you just click and spray, you can't spray into the castle because it's protected by the selection, so there's no danger of getting rid of the turret, but you can extend the cloud now down to the transparent edge while the castle is quite safe. Don't worry about that wall there, we're going to do that on a separate layer and extend it to the edge of the frame, but something like this should work quite well. So once you finish cloning the clouds, press Ctrl D to deselect the marquee, and then click here to create a new layer called layer 2. And what we'll do now is create a new selection just to extend the wall, and I'm going to preserve the wall from being in areas we don't want it to go just by drawing a marquee. So let's just click and draw like so. If we just want to fine-tune that position, we can place as many points as we need, so something like that should be about the right shape for the wall. And let me just click and place that last point on the first. So there's our wall shape selection. What we're going to do now is press S again for the clone stamp, and then alt click to sample a bit of wall here, and then just click and spray to extend it over the other areas. And it's not actually going outside of that wall shape selection, so we're building our own wall to take it to the edge of the frame. I'm going to fine tune this in just a sec. It's not exactly looking perfect with the bricks. The top here is quite important, so that's a thicker edge there, so we just click and move to the corner there. We can then maybe extend it in a more effective way by clicking and spraying. Again, little and often seems to do the trick, and then maybe click here and tidy up anything that doesn't quite look right until you're happy, and press Ctrl D to deselect the wall. Let's pop back to the cloud layer, because you can see we've got quite a straight line there now where the clouds actually went up against the selection, and we need to soften that a wee bit. We can do that by using the eraser tool. Target the cloud layer. Let's take a nice small brush, like around about 15 pixels in size, and just click and spray to let that area jut out a little bit more so we've got less of a vertical line. And also if we hold shift and click here, we can draw another line here by clicking shift, and that just gives you a nice soft edge rather than a hard edged selection. Again, click here, hold shift, click again, we get a bit of a soft line there. We might need to go back to S with a clone stamp, alt click to sample some clouds, scale that down to a really tiny 20 pixels, and then just extend the clouds up a wee bit there just to soften the edge. So the cool thing about cloning is you can fine tune things and get them perfect, especially when we're cloning on to a separate layer like this one here. So I can turn the clouds off, see the original, turn them on again, and we can add or subtract to that using the clone stamp or the eraser. There's a little bit of transparency there, for example, so I'm going to alt click and then spray just to extend that to the edge of the frame. Make another selection at the other side of the castle, and then use the clone stamp to select clouds and clone them up against the edge of the frame. Then Ctrl D to deselect, and we can then tidy that up again later using the eraser. But what I want to do now is create a new layer for the grass, which will be layer 3, and let's just Ctrl minus to zoom out so we can see the grass. And what we need to do is now extend this bit of lawn here, And again, I can do that using the polygonal lasso. So click here, and then we'll make a patch of grass to go up to the edge of the frame. So I'm just going to click to select the top section because I don't want to actually clone grass into the clouds. And then what we can do is inverse that selection like we did before. Go select, inverse, then press S for the clone stab, or click to grab a bit of grass from around about here. Maybe with the right square bracket we can change size to about 125, and then click and spray, and then spray again by alt clicking to sample another bit, and slowly but surely we can extend the grass to the edge of the frame. Now the grass works quite well by choosing areas that are closer to move into the bottom because you get a larger scale that way, and also the textures help grow more effectively towards the edge of the frame. So again, by cloning little and often, we can hide patches that look like they've been extended from different areas. And I'll show you the end result in just a tick.